This is Danny Flexen here for Seconds Out. Delighted to be joined by boxing journalist and expert in the realm of PED usage in combat sports, Gabe Montoya. Gabe, how are you?
I'm doing well, man. How you doing?
I'm very good, thank you. Last time we spoke, we went through the positive test for clomiphene that Conor Benn was found to have in a VADA test, and the postponed. I don't know if the fight had actually been postponed. It might have happened while we were on the call with him and Chris Eubank Jr. as a
Yeah,
result.
yeah.
Since then, there was a long period where everyone else, bar Conor Benn and his team, were talking about the issue. But now that silence has been broken. We found out yesterday that Conor Benn had relinquished his British Boxing Board of Control license ahead of a hearing where he was going to be charged with misconduct, although not related, we're told, to the VADA test, but gave up his license without attending the hearing, as it turned out, although he was legally represented. And then Eddie Hearn pre-warned us there would be a raft of newspaper and national broadcaster interviews with Conor Benn coming out, where he would give his side of the story. These started breaking last night, or for you tonight, I guess, with the time difference. And I just thought it'd be helpful to the viewers to go through some of these newspaper stories and kind of talk around some of the things Conor Benn's saying, if that works for you.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so the first thing that came back to me, and this has been something that's been rumoured for a while, is that there was a second positive test for clomiphene on the 25th of July, so a good 2 months before the one that's been widely reported on September the 23rd. And it says, this is in the Sun story, came back with an adverse finding towards the end of August, but Benn's camp treated the red flag. So the test was on July 25th, but the result came back towards the end of August. But Benn's camp treated the red flag as an accident or error. Um, I, I guess, first of all, what I want to ask is the Board of Control ultimately scuppered the Eubank Jr. fight. But under the VADA kind of protocol, the first adverse finding would not have been reported to the Board of Control. Is that correct?
I, I'm not sure about that. That strikes me as very odd that they found out about it, but no one else did, and why nothing was done. What we're seeing, overall is like Eddie Hearn talking a lot and
Mm.
Ben talking a lot, and both of them throwing out things sometimes that don't quite match, don't make a lot of sense. Um, but let me back up though. Just answer a question people might have, why it takes so long. Like they tested him on the 25th, but then the result came back so late.
Yeah.
It's not like his name is on the sample. It's given a number, so people don't know who it is. And then it's batched. When it's sent to the lab, it's not just like, here, test this sample. It's batched in with others, and they kind of do them, in mass that way. So it would probably take a while for, the batch to fill up and then the samples to be done. Uh, so that's why that is. Uh,
Yeah, I mean, because from what I understand, VADA usually have an obligation to let the boxer and the team know, and if it's around a specific fight, then the team of the opponent also.
and as
Um,
I understood it, like the sanctioning body or the governing body that's handling it also finds out. That's my understanding. That's why it seems strange that this hasn't happened.
and also the kind of treating it as an accident or error seems a very strange reaction to have to an adverse finding on a drugs test.
Well, especially because they're also now both Eddie Hearn and Ben have thrown out this idea that it's contamination based on the trace amounts. I don't want to jump the gun on you, but it seems to me that they're trying to dismiss it out hand. It's just like this thing. But like even Oscar Valdez was like, look, he seemed to know what it was that he took.
Mm.
He called it a tea. Everybody made a meme about it, but he seemed to have an idea of what it was. They're not even coming out with what thing was contaminated. They're just saying it was so little in my body that it was deemed not performance enhancing. Well, like, it's clomiphene. It's an anti estrogen. It's an estrogen blocker, and it's also a drug used at the end of a cycle. So like, what benefits are we talking about? Like, they're framing things, but they're completely out of context. as a way to dismiss things, as opposed to, having an actual concrete science-based defense.
So then the second test was taken September the 23rd. It says these triggered more alarm bells. Ben feared he was spiked by someone in or around some of the gyms he uses. Now, if we're saying there are two positive tests, which we are, July and September, is this a serial spiker? Someone who's got a vendetta against Conor Benn in one of the other gyms he spars in? I mean, it seems like a very random explanation.
Yeah, it sure does. It's just not plausible. I mean, there are some people that I think it was Ben Johnson felt that he got spiked. It was like a can of Coke, an Olympic runner. Um, but like in this case, like it's one or the other. Like somebody drops dissolves a pill of clomiphene in your drink. That's what you're saying happened. You wouldn't have trace amounts, would you, if you then got tested? You'd just pop for the drug.
Mm,
So pick a story.
yeah. It says Ben's camp now believe contamination was the cause. Now, this is something that Eddie Hearn's floated, saying a lot of the evidence points to contamination, although without going into specifics. The problem with that is there's two positive tests, and the likelihood of a company as reputable and as respected as VADA contaminating the sample once is kind of far fetched enough, but twice seems just beyond comprehension. But not only that, if we're saying it is contamination, as far as we're aware, the B sample hasn't been requested to be tested. So are they saying it's been contaminated in some way before it gets to the lab? That confused me.
Right. I mean, Brandon Rios, when he tested positive for when he fought Manny Pacquiao for like DMAA, um, and his Alex Ariza was his strength coach at that point. And they tried to claim, I think remember Ellie Seckbach did like a video of them, if somebody had handled the sample wrong, or it was like a tainted glass or
Mm,
something. People, I think even, is it Lamont Peterson when he tested against, I want to say Lucas Matisse maybe, and they tried to say that there was some. No, it's Lamont Peterson and Amir Khan. I
uh,
I, I think some of that camp believes that there was some sort of switcheroo there that happened, and it's just like it's just not the way it works. And actually, why I mentioned Lamont Peterson, let me just before I forget it. Conor Benn has said, like, do I look like an idiot? I'm the one that asked for the testing. Why would I then take the drug? Lamont Peterson asked to do the drug testing for VADA. Like nobody had really used them to that point. He's like their first client.
mm,
Meanwhile, he had a hip. In his hip, he had a slow release testosterone pellet that a doctor had given him before the first Amir Khan fight. So, do I look like an idiot? I don't know. I just think there's a lot of
well,
junk science in the sport. And it's, the V is for voluntary. Anybody that signs up for VADA that gets caught, it's like, it's not a good defense. I signed up for this, and so therefore I'm innocent. It doesn't work. Lance Armstrong, you know, Lance Armstrong. He signed up for the test. I'm the cleanest, most tested athlete in the world, and he was lying the whole time. So, as Victor Conte told me, when guys start to take PEDs, they immediately become liars to themselves and to others. I'm not calling Conor Benn a liar. It's just kind of a truism. The longer you study this.
now, just quoting directly from Conor Benn in the article, he says, I was informed of the first foul and I thought it's probably a faulty test. I thought we'll get to the bottom of it. We're still trying to do that. We're making progress. Now, a faulty test, this is another thing. We talked about contamination. A test often, ever faulty from VADA.
I just don't know what that means. They use a WADA accredited Olympic, level lab, right? They're not going to Quest Diagnostics. No, no shade on them, but they're not like a WADA accredited lab. There's not many of them in the world, and I imagine that's why UCAD. I don't know if it's the second test or the fact that they've used. He tested for a drug that WADA doesn't allow you to use in or out of
Mm,
competition. There's no allowable limit. It's just banned, and they're using the same lab that probably UCAD is using. So there's there's a bar that they've cleared that UCAD's probably comfortable with legally. Um, but yeah, what does he mean by faulty tests? Like I said, I think the last time, what you can see here is that he's not advocating to take the hair test and prove that there's no long-term use, which, considering the length of, the distance between the positives, he really should be wanting to do. Um, and it doesn't matter that his head is shaved. That hair is actually not as good a sample as body hair, which isn't as exposed to sunlight, and you're not like shampooing it constantly the way you do, people, I don't know what his hair regimen is, but most people, your head hair gets exposed to chemicals more, and so the just use body hair to test his long-term drug use. If he's really trying to prove his innocence, that's what he'd be doing, and he'd be talking about joining VADA for a year. Instead, what the lawyer is probably telling him to do is attack the systems, attack the tests. Meanwhile, they're not testing the B sample.
Now, you mentioned UCAD there. He says, I passed all my UCAD tests, which people aren't talking about. I've passed all my tests in and out of camp. Now, I did some research on this last night. We were talking about it on social media. And UCAD do apparently test for clomiphene. A lot of rugby players seem to have been popped for it in the last few years. It seems to be a drug of choice in the rugby world, which is something I didn't know until yesterday. Um, but he doesn't, from what Eddie Hearn said and from what he said, Connor said in previous interviews, he passed the UCAD test after the second VADA test that came up for clomiphene. No one's mentioned whether he had a UCAD test between the two VADA tests, the July and the September. Now, he's in camp going up to a big fight. Would we expect UCAD to have tested him in that window?
I don't know. I don't know how often they test. I mean, is UCAD? I assume they're just like the Nevada State Athletic Commission, where they've started to do spot testing now and again over the years, particularly when Floyd and Manny were still fighting. Um, but generally it's the night of the fight.
Mm.
Maybe before and after, and that's about it. Um,
Yeah, because
so
UCAD have launched their own investigation now, and apparently VADA are happy to share the analysis and results from Conor Benn's tests. But yeah, it seems to be this kind of, well, I've passed the UCAD test, so that is an indication that I'm not using this drug regularly or long term. But there's been no statement that says UCAD have tested between July, what was it, July 20, I want to get the date right,
25th, I believe.
July 25th and September 23rd. So if they didn't test between then and they only tested him, say, before July 25th and then on fight night, presumably if they were trace amounts anyway, those drugs would no longer be in his system. That's plausible.
Right. And we don't know, does UCAD just straight up test for clomiphene? We don't have that answer yet. Is that part of the panel? Some people do a full panel, some people test for only a few things. So, we don't know. They're being kind of pointedly vague, and like I said, just kind of attacking little areas and planting seeds, but not, uh, he tested positive twice.
Mm.
There's not, and for a drug that's not, it's not naturally occurring, it's not allowed in the body, and they're not coming forward with, what was it that he was taking that had a estrogen blocker in it on the side. And let's just talk about contamination for a minute, because it
Sure.
makes me think of Andre Berto and nandrolone, which we never really found out. I didn't get to the bottom of it, I don't think. But remember, he tested positive in his rematch, the lead up to the Victor Ortiz fight for nandrolone.
Mm.
And nandrolone is called like the kiss of death because it has like this super long half-life, like 18 months or something. And just like a grain of sand can just kick off a mad positive. But where guys aren't like straight taking nandrolone, or maybe some are, but what happens with it is that you're taking something else. You went to a black market lab and you ended up, there's not as clean there or whatever, and your drug gets mixed in with a little bit of nandrolone, and boom, you pop positive, even if the other one cycles out fast. And so when we talk about contamination, it's like, so you bought some sort of off-market thing, and in that lab, they're also giving out clomiphene. Is that your story? Like what is it that you were taking?
Yeah, I mean, he says later in the article, trace amounts were found, the tiniest of traces. I mean, that hasn't been confirmed as yet. The only thing I can think of is contamination. Now, just for people out there, if you are found with a tiny trace of a banned substance, what other explanations are there? Because if he can only think of contamination, I'm sure there's other reasons why you would only have a very small amount in your system.
Well, and the contamination sounds like there's a very small amount of this thing in the thing you're taking. So then you metabolize it, and then even more trace elements. Is that what you're saying? It was just trace enough that it doesn't help you, but trace enough to kind of just be in there. Like, make it make sense, man.
I mean, presumably, if you're, taking something, whether intentionally or otherwise, on a long-term basis, and you come to the end of a cycle of that substance, there would only be trace amounts remaining, depending on the timing of the test.
Right, because you're not, you're taking the drugs for recovery and training. So you can like work harder and get to this whole other level and then like recover fast. And then you stop taking that drug and to offset what it's done to your endocrine system, you take the clomiphene to finish out your cycle. But yeah, it's got a 1 to 3 month clearing period. So depending on
Mhm.
how much you're taking, yeah, you're going to want to have that out, especially knowing that you're going into VADA testing. Um, I don't know, what they're thinking. I just know, enough guys that are doing it that everybody probably thinks it's not going to be me.
Yeah.
I'm not going to get caught.
He says the traces were so low there was no benefit. Again, not confirmed, but also beside the point. The science will prove that. I've got the best scientists on this, and I'm now spending a lot of money trying to prove my innocence here. A lot of money. You were talking about me really trying to prove my innocence and get to the bottom of what has happened here. I mean, what would at this stage, and let's give him the benefit of the doubt, what would be considered an acceptable explanation for the findings?
And like an acceptable reason for why they were in there.
Yeah.
That he was taking a supplement that he didn't vet with VADA, didn't let them know, because that's part of the process of applying is letting people know what you're taking. They also offer services where you can send in everything you're doing and have it tested to make sure that you're all good. He didn't do that apparently. I think that's where his story is leading. So he'd have to supply the receipts, show the thing that he was taking, and have it tested and be like, oh yeah, there's clomiphene in this and it's not listed. That would be the bar, I think, right?
And then what, a backdated or retrospective TUE, would that be possible?
Um, or maybe just a time served kind of ban,
Mm.
and he's able to reschedule. But yeah, he'd have to prove that there's also this kind of strict liability thing, that you're responsible for what goes in your body. But he's lost this fight, and he's losing time. He's having to retrain all over again, presumably without this magic substance that he needs in his camp, that's contaminated. Um, and yeah, I'm not that punitive with it. If it's something like that that you can prove, like with Canelo, guys still call him Clanello,
Mm.
because he tested positive for clenbuterol, but apparently he showed up with receipts, showed where he got the meat from, was able to prove his case, and then he did the hair follicle test, which showed no long-term use, and did a year of VADA, and still does it for his fights. I'd like him to still be doing year-round VADA, but I think he is eligible within the WBC's program.
Mm.
Those are the steps, and that to me is like he set the bar for a guy testing positive.
Well, let's see if Conor Benn follows suit. And this story will continue to unfold, so I'm sure we'll be inviting you back on sooner rather than later.
Yeah, and I hopefully by then Eddie Hearn and Ben have their story straight, because it seems like they don't even seem to match that much to me. It's yeah, they got to pick their poison here, but I'm curious to see where it goes, man. So thanks for having me on again.
No, no, really appreciate your insight. Yeah, have a good rest of the evening, and we'll see you again soon.
All right, man.